Just peer support group.
Nice.
Yeah. It's that's a bulk of what I do now, and I love. Are we? Oh, hey.
Hey, keeping it real, keeping it natural. What?
Out of my hair.
Liz showing you her authentic self. It's Tuesday. No, it's not. It is not Tuesday. That is muscle memory. It's Thursday, January 25th, 7:01 p.m. on the East Coast. Since I'm the only one on the East Coast, it is 6:01 p.m. Central, 5:01 Mountain Time. We've represented all the times that are currently on camera. If you're just joining us, please say hello. Let us know you're here. Say hi and let us know where you're from. And we'll give it a couple minutes so people can come in and get situated.
I'm done brushing my hair.
Are you done brushing your hair? All right. Then we can start.
For some reason I start speaking or I say like random words in Spanish. It really is just because I'm learning Spanish right now. And I talk in that way all day. I mean, just random words. So for some reason I just bust out and I'm just like, mañana. Just know. That is the only reason.
So it's not a tick.
No.
Okay. Hi, Jen. Hi, Mike Sizemore. Hey, Amy. Good to see you. I think Sandy was here before. Nathan. Hey, Nathan. How's everyone? We have a very special guest tonight. Oh. Two very special guests to Community Conversations, actually. So we're excited to dive into some really good conversation. Hi, Norm from Ontario, Canada.
Well, thank you for having me, by the way. It's so good to see the both of you.
It's good to see you too, Chrissy. Grace is in the house. Hey, Grace. Matt Bannister, the ever quiet Matt Bannister, who we love to see. He's like an instant shot of Red Bull in the chat. He is. He's awesome. Hope everyone's New Year's off to a good start. It's my first live stream since the new year has hit, so I guess I'm late to the party. How are y'all doing? Liz, how are you?
It is January 25th. It feels as though it's July, so I am good, but it's been crazy. Like, you know how sometimes you're like, wait, we're still in January? Like, you know, like in November, you're like, how are we already in November? How is the year almost over? And then in January, you're like, this has been the longest month of my life. That's how I feel. But I am here, and I don't have knots in my hair anymore because I got it out, so I'm happy, and it's good to see y'all.
Awesome. It's good to see you. How are you, Chrissy Hodges?
I'm doing well. It took me about, Liz, I know how you feel. That's how I felt in December. It took me about, a good month or so to recover from the 3 trips to Europe in 10 weeks.
Yeah.
Events. So I finally feel like I am back in my element and I'm loving the winter because that's my favorite season. And I have a few more weeks before I jet set again to Spain.
At least you fly private, though. That's nice.
Oh yeah. But we take off from my backyard.
The Game Changer jet is fueled and ready.
It's orange.
It's orange. It's in the shape of a banana. Go ahead, Liz. What?
When you say winter is your favorite season, can you clarify that? I don't know what that means.
Well, yes, I can. I hate the heat. I grew up in Georgia, where Ethan is right now, and I'll tell you the connection that I've made to the hating the heat too is when I was younger. We'll just dive right into it. When I was younger, and I did not know that I had OCD, and I lived with sexual intrusive thoughts for years and years and years, and I would get the groinal. The heat would make things so much worse because I would be sweating at the same time I had the groinal. So it just confused a lot more things down there than needed to be confused. And so I do think that there's like this memory, like these memories of when I start sweating and getting overwhelmed, I have like this response from when I was younger. And so I really appreciate being cool. Anybody that knows me and spends time with me knows that when I'm hot, everybody in the room is miserable.
Okay, well, if you want exposure, you can come visit me in summer. So
no.
There's that.
Oh,
never.
Houston in June.
Never.
Awful. All right, speaking of...
the humidity. Oh, it's so good for you.
Speaking of... I had the thing in Austin, Liz, there was one point where I was stuck outside of my Airbnb for 5 minutes and I was crying. And like, because the sweat was pouring and I just sat there and I was like, I hate everybody in Texas.
All right. Well, we have some questions about what PSS means and peer support. So speaking of groinal, let me just break this open, and it was a good segue into, let me just intro this real quick and get all the housekeeping out of the way, and we can dive in. So hi, welcome all. My name is Ethan. I'm a national advocate for the IOCDF. Welcome to Community Conversations. This is a special edition Thursday night with two awesome guests, Liz McInvale and Chrissy Hodges. This community conversation is intended to serve as educational content, is not intended to replace therapy. For treatment-related questions, please be sure to work with your local provider or contact a local clinician. The IOCDF is not a crisis hotline. If you are in crisis or ever feeling suicidal or unsafe, please go to your local emergency room or call 911 or the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline by dialing 988. As always, we want to create a safe space and be kind and respectful to everyone. At the end of the day, we're all here supporting one another. And please note, this is being broadcast on several social media platforms and is being recorded. So keep that in mind as we talk about all our personal stuff. And lastly, I would like to, well, quite honestly, everybody knows Liz. She's my fellow national advocate for the IOCDF board member and all around OG advocate. But Chrissy Hodges, honestly, in my mind, doesn't need an introduction, but I'm going to give her one anyway. So Chrissy Hodges is a certified peer support specialist working internationally, providing peer support and referral consultations to individuals living with OCD through Treatment for OCD Consulting. She is the co-founder of Peer Recovery Services, operating in Colorado government contract placing peer support specialists in state mental institutes. She's the author of Pure OCD, The Invisible Side of Obsessive Compulsive Disorder. Chrissy is also the founder and executive director of the nonprofit OCD Game Changers. So, as you know, we rarely have guests on Community Conversations, but this seemed like a good one. Lots of good advocates, lots of experience, and we are here for your questions. So with all of that, welcome, ladies. As I had puberty just now. Well, ladies. Time for some water. Carry on, Chrissy, about Texas in heat.
Oh, no, that's okay. I just wanted to say thank you for having me here. We've kind of had all separate conversations in the last few months about advocacy, the importance of advocacy in community. And it's good to be here. And it's good to be, to feel welcome and part of the organization. I run OCD Game Changers. So excited for us to do some collaborations this year. And yeah, I just appreciate you both.
We appreciate you. Liz, how are you doing?
I'm good. All things considered, everything is good.
It's still January, in case you were wondering. So
only a few more days, just a few more days.
So we can dive into advocacy. As always, Community Conversations is kind of just an organic conversation that occurs. So we'll start with a topic, usually not, and then the questions will hit, and we'll just dive right in. And as you know, this is a conversation between all of us. So anything that you've ever wanted to ask Chrissy, anything that you've ever wanted to ask Liz, this is the perfect opportunity to do so.
Well, first, I just want to clarify, Ethan, PSS is a peer support specialist. So I am a certified, trained, supervised peer support, and that is what I do. I'm certified here in the state of Colorado, and have been recertified twice. So just wanted to clear that up.
Can you further define peer support specialist?
So peer support a peer support specialist is an individual who is trained in support, the supplementary support of peer support to therapy. So it's not therapeutic, it's not clinical. It's a supplementary support that helps walk alongside individuals who are working toward recovery. It isn't just specific to OCD, by the way. Peer support is for mental health. I worked for 2 years in the state institution at Fort Logan on
That's where we met, wasn't it? I'm sorry, it's not funny.
And I was part of the trauma-informed care team there. And so I was able to get a lot of experience in how to work with all different kinds of disorders, really got to understand the system, what the system is like for people, especially here in Colorado. And then eventually, after I started my YouTube channel, saw that there was a real need for peer support in our community, especially because of the ego-dystonic nature of OCD. And so I provide support. I do not provide therapy. It is nothing clinical about what I do. I am just somebody that can walk alongside of you while you are working toward recovery.
You're not just somebody. I'm like, do you see my face? I'm like, what? You are an incredible. No, I mean, really, like Chrissy, it's interesting because when you think about a residential model of treatment that many of us work in and have, we have what we call residential counselors. And I tell everybody that RRCs are the bread and butter, the hands and feet of this program in every way, right? Because they're the ones doing the on the ground work, implementing we develop the treatment plan, sure, as clinicians, and then they're helping keep people accountable. You're helping coach someone, you're helping motivate someone, you're helping provide real-time support. And maybe my understanding is biased, but like, I think a lot of that is all rolled into what you do as well for OCD when you're doing OCD specific coaching. Is that right?
Absolutely. And from the coaching aspect, I was trained actually to be an ERP coach. Again, not clinical, but by a therapist who worked at McLean in Boston. And what he would do was I would come in and help support people through their exposures under his plan and provide peer support, basically saying, I have been here before. I know how hard this is. I remember the struggle. I remember when you were going through this. And it is just a motivating factor knowing that you're not alone going through something that can be super challenging. And as we all know here, OCD can make you feel very alone, especially when the content is super taboo, like pedophilia theme or sexual violent intrusive thoughts, things like that. Knowing someone has gone through it, knowing you're not the only person walking around with it, and knowing other people have recovered can really help motivate you in treatment.
Yeah, I always tell people that, one of the biggest blessings of residential care is that you get so much, obviously 24-hour support, but also you get these colleagues, if that's what you want to call it, but like you get co-patients, right, when you're here, but that become your friends and your support. And when you're doing outpatient care, you don't get that. And like that, I can't tell y'all, like 2 of my best friends are from treatment, or from when I was inpatient, and like that, those are 2 of my today best friends. And we're such a huge instrumental role in my recovery. But in the outpatient setting, you don't get that same level of connection and support. And so I just think it's so amazing that you have found a way to offer that to people that otherwise might not have access to it. And a lot of times, I just want to tell everyone, so many people do not realize the importance of this. Like, I tell people all the time, like, receiving advocacy and then becoming an advocate when you're ready, I really do believe is one of the biggest and most important pieces of treatment, and I think all 3 of us were mentored by Michael Janicki, and, obviously one of the greatest of all times when it comes to OCD work. And Mike's big thing that he shared for so many of us, and for, really helped lead the work on, is that like advocacy is that final leg. And like, it is kind of the difference for many people in the recovery process. So anyway, what you do is awesome, and just so excited to have you here. But so I've told you this, but just honored that we can work together, share the space together, but also just to see what you've done and the way you've grown, game changers, and everything you do is just so incredible and inspiring.
Thank you. Well, I want to take the opportunity too. We've all known each other for many, many years. I realized that this year, as the calendar turns, I've been doing advocacy for 12 years. And Ethan and I met right after he did his keynote, and I didn't go to it, and I went running instead. And then Liz, I've shared this with you before, but we cannot do the advocacy that we do without honoring the people that came before us. And I remember in 2011, logging onto the IOCDF website back then and being like, who is this Liz McInvale person? And feeling like, if this girl
was young too then.
I was like, if this woman can do this, then I can do it too. And I think that all of us, really the wonderful thing about advocacy is we all know it's not about us, number one. And number two, we're paving the way for other people to come in and do, even bigger. So I just wanted to share that like we have like multi-layer here of advocacy, that we've all been inspired by each other and other people. And that's what it's all about. And
that's beautiful.
It's about the community.
That's beautifully said. We've all been inspired by each other and so many people. I was actually going to add on to Liz's statement about you, Christy, in the sense that I think, echo. I think that you've done an incredible job, creating form and shape and structure to what peer support specialists look like, and giving an avenue for ways to get there in the OCD community. As you mentioned, it's been in the psychological community, mental health space for a long time. I remember talking about it with you in the mid 20 teens. I don't even want to call it the teens. Is that what we call it now? But, you know, and it made sense because if you looked at, you know, addiction programs and recovery programs, everyone who worked there was a former patient. It's like it was built into the process. And there was so, as Liz so beautifully said, there was so much relatability and hope that came from being able to connect with somebody that'd been through the process, but always also had an expertise. And so you've really created, like I said, a path forward for other people to see that it's possible. And also, like, obviously, where you've brought peer support specialists and what you're doing, obviously your nonprofit, OCD Game Changers, has really filled a need and a gap in the community as someone that was a small part of that at the very beginning. And so, yeah, I echo Liz's sentiment completely. And then, you know, Liz, watching you grow, I know this is like a giant hug fest, but watching you grow, you know, from an advocate into becoming a you know, a leader, a clinical leader in the community, and a director at the IOCDF Texas, no, OCDI Texas, and obviously, you know, building out residential and your own practices and everything that you've brought to the table with research. It really is amazing to continue to collaborate in the way that we do. I agree with Chrissy. I think 2024 is going to be an absolutely incredible year and the start of some really beautiful things. We've got a new executive director at the IOCDF. We've got new collaborations happening. I think we're about to bust this thing wide open. I've always said for the last 10 years that, like, this is the next movement. Mental health, but OCD specifically, is the next movement, like all the movements we've seen before that. And I really think that we're going to start to change the conversation in a much bigger way than we have. Continue to chip away at the stigma and the awareness and education, and like just make bigger chunks and dents in that sort of barrier that's been in our way for so long. So I really feel like a new chapter is turned in a much bigger book, and I'm super excited to just be a small part and collaborate. And yes, it's community first. It always is. It's not about us. It's about you all. And so thank you, and just giant virtual hugs to everybody. I just quickly wanted to point out, Grace at 7:09 p.m. asked about an affiliate in Michigan and how could you possibly start one? At 7:10 p.m., IOCDF posted the link at the website about OCD affiliates, so you can click there and learn more, Grace. And it's good to see you, Grace. I hope you're doing well. Also, there was another question from Judith, which Brennan also got to quickly, about how to become an official IOCDF advocate. You can check out, thank you. You can check out the link at 7:13 p.m. iocdf.org/advocate program to find out more. I just have to add a little tidbit on that, which is, I know you say official advocate. I just want to point out that like, we're all advocates. If you're here, if you're talking, if you're commenting, if you're telling your story, if you're sharing with others, I always kind of like, as the advocate program has grown, both with Game Changers and IOCDF, as it's grown, and like there's this sort of optics around, well, an official IOCDF advocate. You know, of course, it is one of the most meaningful things I've done as a national advocate, and Liz and all of that stuff. But I really want to make it clear that all advocates we're all on the same page. We're all trying to help other folks. We're all trying to spread the word, and we all have our passions within the OCD community. So, you know, I always like think about what's some new branding that we can do to like not necessarily put emphasis on IOCDF and more emphasis on advocate, in the sense that, you know, no one is any better than anybody else. We're all together trying to make significant change for our community. So we're all official advocates in the OCD community. But if you want to learn more about becoming an IOCDF advocate, and also, I don't know, Brennan, if you want to put, of course, Chrissy's website as well for information on advocacy related to Game Changers. Chrissy, if Brennan doesn't have that, just pop that in the private chat and he'll post that in the comments as well.
Yes. And one of the things that we do at Game Changers is it's less about kind of being an official advocacy piece in Game Changers, but more about, do you want to create community in your community? A lot of people want to start something locally, which I think is some of the most important advocacy, local advocacy, where you're at, pulling people together. One of the things that we found in Game Changers that has been hugely beneficial and just so rewarding for us is to be able to, when we're invited, we go to people's towns or countries at this point, because we're doing a lot of international work. And we put on events and we sponsor it. But the people that bring us in, they're the ones that know the communities best. And this has been very eye-opening when we go to different communities. You know, when you live in America, you think everybody's like America, but all of a sudden when we're going to Spain, we have no idea what the community needs. We have no idea what the major themes are there, the access to treatment, all of this. So we have like Alejandro Ibarra, who's like the advocate extraordinaire. He is amazing. And so, you know, he is the one that kind of dictates how the events go. And we come and put our name on it, our branding, to help get the word out. And then we can run and create community wherever you're at. So if that's something that you're interested in, please contact us, because we're going lots of places, including, and I'm just going to announce it because it's official, we're going to Ecuador this year. And we're going to do, Alejandro's going to do a training in Spanish there for therapists. And we're doing an event, and then we're doing a community day. And I could not be more excited. So we're doing everything that we can.
That's amazing.
And it's so exciting, isn't it? So
cool.
I know.
So should we go ahead and try to do the rest of the 48 minutes in Spanish so that you can practice?
You're like, why?
48 minutes left. Let's go, guys. Or 38. Sorry, you know my math.
So we have there's so much we could. Good job. I'm like Taco. I don't know. So what?
Nothing.
Every time I'm on with Liz, I know I've said something slightly offensive somehow, because Liz always gives me this, and I'm like, I could have said door, but then I get self-conscious about it. I'm just gonna sit with it. I don't want your reassurance. She's like, no, you did, and it's over. You're canceled. So I would love to talk about advocacy, but I also want to get to some of these statements and questions because there's some good ones here. So Matt Bannister at 7:12 p.m. wrote, peer support is absolutely game-changing in recovery with connection, empowerment, and totally validating. I think Christy may agree with you. So thank you, Matt, for that. Lots of agreements with Crispy as well. Mike Sizemore at 7:17 p.m. In the mainstream, you hear a great deal about PTSD, bipolar, addiction, depression, but you never hear about OCD. And I don't know what your thoughts on that. My quick thought is, oh, you do, just not in the right context. I think we hear a lot about OCD in the mainstream media and the entertainment, but unfortunately, it's all used incorrectly or in ways that doesn't properly and accurately reflect what OCD actually is, which is, I think, our challenge as advocates. I always feel like that we literally claw to move a step forward, and then somebody with 200 million followers says one thing and kind of knocks us back. Not back all the way. We're always making forward progress, but I feel like we always have to work 10 times harder. And that's why, like, the advocacy is, every one of you is so important. The more we multiply our voices, the more we take proactive advocacy steps to change the narrative, the less those things, whether they're social media or movies or TV or news, those will have impacts on our community. I don't know, Chrissy and Liz, if you have thoughts on OCD and the media and representation or things we can do to change.
I mean, I have thoughts. I can just quickly say, I mean, one of the things that I've learned in the last many years that I've done advocacy is, I mean, I'm a little bit more advocacy towards like the community backbone right now. But when I remember when I first started, I was on the rampage to like take charge and have everybody, change their mind about what OCD and OCD isn't. And I think that we're all passionate about that. One of the things that it takes, and I'm just going to say it because you just got to say it, is it takes guts. You have to be willing to go up against people who are just not wanting to hear that what they're posting on social media or what they're saying in the media is incorrect. And a lot of times, unfortunately, people who live with OCD we can be people pleasers. We don't want conflict. We don't want altercation. But if you want to be an advocate and if you want to be an activist and you really want to speak up, you got to be willing. You got to be willing to take the heat. I've always said that since day one. If you want to be an advocate, you've got to be willing to take the heat. You don't have to be a dick. Sorry, I don't know if I should say that here, but you don't have to be like that. You don't have to be mean or combative or whatever, but people sometimes don't like to be challenged. And in this realm, you have to challenge people. You have to say, actually, that isn't what OCD is. And they're going to, people don't like to be called out. So that can be tough about advocacy, but after a while, and especially when you have the backing of a lot of great advocates that will back you up in what you're advocating for, you got to be willing to speak out, and you got to be sometimes willing to take the heat.
I love that, Chrissy. Liz, I'm going to toss a follow-up to you. Having substantial experience in the media, especially as an advocate, having done all the talk shows early on, and I would even wager to say like traditional media, traditional advocacy within kind of the spaces of television. How, along Chrissy's lines, what kind of change are you seeing in the media in terms of advocacy approach in order to really penetrate the issues and cut through the noise to let people hear what's going on, how we can change, and so forth?
Oh man, that's a good question. I think that the power of each individual advocate is just so magnified and incredible compared to where it was 15 or 20 years ago. And I say that in the sense that Instagram and social media and blogs and online postings, you are seeing so many people be willing to talk about their diagnosis, talk about treatment in ways that no one ever did before, right? People, when I was first diagnosed, no one even knew really what the acronym OCD stood for. It's that decades have totally changed our understanding of it. And of course, that also means that it's increased our misunderstanding of it a little bit too, right? No one knew it at all. Now some people know it incorrectly, right? It's someone who's a neat freak or likes things a certain way or whatever it might be. And so we have to address that. But I think across the board, I really do believe that people know what OCD stands for now. If you talk about an OCD diagnosis, it tends to be responded, not always, but with empathy and maybe not necessarily understanding, but that's a huge shift. And more understanding is happening. I do have to say, I don't really think the mainstream media has done much. I don't think that the mainstream media has done really any like good measurable change for OCD the way they have for disorders like autism and others, and so we have a long way to go, but I do think that the individuals, right? And those of you on this live stream, those of you listening, watching, I think the difference is really being made loud and clear by you guys. And so I think the louder we are, the ripple effect will keep happening.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. Obviously, with the advent of social media and ability for advocates and individuals to put the power in their own hands and really be able to speak to the public in any way they want, in any creative way they want. I think the other piece of it is of course, individuals have done amazing things in terms of the media and entertainment. I mean, Rose Cartwright's show and things like that. People have done the work. It's not that nobody's tried or broken through. I think the message for me is that everyone needs to understand the debilitating nature of OCD. No difference than cancer or ALS or any other disorder, right? Because the minute it's tone deaf to talk about it in a way that isn't true, that isn't representative of the disorder, you can't talk about it that way anymore. You have to stop because you'll be ridiculed or yelled at, or people will be angry with you. And I think obviously, and also as a filmmaker, TV is a visual medium. So I can't see your intrusive thoughts, but I can see you washing your hands. So, it's definitely pigeonholed in that way because it's visual. But at the end of the day, I think if every studio head, if every network executive, if every CEO at all the news stations finally understood the devastating nature of OCD, and along with any other mental illness, then it can no longer be the topic of comedies. It can no longer be the topic of misrepresentation in ways that are fun and kitschy to make a buck. Because if you did that with cancer, like everybody would be all over it. We can think of 1,000 causes and issues where. So, I mean, I really think it starts with, education. And once it's out there that this is what the disease is, this is how debilitating it can be. Hopefully all of that stops. I feel like it has to start at like the root level.
Can I add to that?
No, of course you can.
I also want to take that a step further with when we are out as advocates and we are speaking about this disorder, our experience does not represent everybody else's experience. And that is one thing that I have seen in the last few years that has become detrimental within our own community. So alongside what you were saying, Ethan, which is, we need to make sure the right education is out there. We need to make sure the right information is out there. Just because you have OCD and just because your treatment was like that does not mean you represent every single person. So if you start advocating and you get on a public platform and you are saying, this is how you treat it, and this is what you do to say this, and this, never be definitive. with your experience with OCD, because first we have to take care of our community. We have to take care of the people inside of the community that maybe ERP isn't working for, or maybe they had to go to ERP way longer than you did. And so if you're out on I know we all want to help people. I do, but be responsible in how you're helping people. Make sure that everything you're advocating with is, this is my experience. This is what I went through, and I don't represent everybody. I have made this mistake many a times in my advocacy career. So I'm not saying I'm perfect at it, but I've had great mentors. Reach out to people that have been doing advocacy for a long time. Ask them about mistakes they've made, things that we can help support you with. Let us help you. We've been here for a long time. But remember, like, we have to take care of the community just the same way that you want to help people. You can really do damage if you're not thinking about mental health as a whole instead of just what you've been through.
Beautifully says. I know Liz has thoughts. Go ahead, Liz.
Yeah, I just couldn't agree more. I think, Chrissy, it's so important for us to understand that advocacy can change so many lives, and it's so instrumental in treatment and even in outcomes in different ways, and management of your symptoms after treatment and all of that. However, advocacy is not treatment, and our own personal experience is our own personal experience. That's very different than clinical insight and recommendations. And, I was an advocate for many years before I became a clinician, like decade, right? Like I did advocacy, and thankfully my OCD stopped me from ever giving advice or feedback, because I was too triggered that I might it was so worried about everything I said and did all the time, but, I think that being a clinician, when I first went to school, I really did think like, oh, I already know OCD. I know how to treat it. Like I really did. Like I was a bit egotistical in that aspect. Right. And when I dove into it, but more importantly, when I got into like internships and my postdoc and being here and 15 years into my career, watching and seeing what I learn every day, and dual diagnosis and differentials and how to assess and what to look for when it looks like OCD, but it's actually not OCD at all. That is so different than advocacy experience. And so it is so important as individuals that are advocates, if you're not a clinician, that you're careful not even to say things like, this is what treatment for OCD is, or this is what it should look like. Because again, it oftentimes you're actually speaking from your lived experience, not from a clinical lens, And so I just love this point, because I think that advocates have an incredible opportunity, and we have to be responsible with our platform, right? And we have to know how we make sure that we stay an advocate or a coach and don't become a clinician.
Absolutely.
Beautifully said. Both of y'all crushed it. And I think, I obviously learned a ton from Liz as I started advocating alongside her. And, I kind of have 3 sentences that I always use when I talk to, whether I'm talking to a large group or I'm talking to a parent, that's reached out to me, which is I can only speak for myself. This is my own experience. I can't speak for anyone else. And I'm not a therapist. So, but those are kind of my 3 or 4 sentences that I always caveat everything with. It's this was just my experience, and it doesn't represent everyone else's. Speaking of that, that's a perfect segue to Lola's just statement, but question at 7:17 p.m. Brendan, you don't need to put it up because it's 3 separate ones, but she starts by saying, or they start by saying, I apologize, I feel like a weirdo recently, maybe some new intrusive thoughts, but maybe I don't know that many folks in the community, but I feel I have had different subtypes and compulsions, both physical and mental. Folks that I heard have OCD say they only have dealt with one subtype and specific compulsions, or they only have 2 or 3. I feel like I had some form of all subtypes for some reason. So for reason I have felt like an outsider within the community. Not sure why I feel this way. I thought this was pertinent because, to Chrissy's point earlier, not one represents everyone. So I just thought that was appropriate, but also wanted Liz and Chrissy to kind of weigh in on Lola's comments as well. So feel free.
I think this just furthers both Liz and my point is, when you're out there advocating and you're saying, well, this is how it happened. And I learned this the hard way. I just want to make a point. I learned this the hard way. I did not go into advocacy. I went into advocacy, kind of what Liz was saying before she became a clinician. I went in there going, oh yeah, everybody's had this experience. Everybody had access to therapy. Everybody can afford therapy. Everybody, it worked the same way it worked for me. And that is just not the case. And I have taken a beating over the last especially 5 or 6 years, becoming really integral in the community that I've built, around the peer support and the people that I work with. Like when I listen to people's stories and I think, wow, those were so different from mine. And, at one point in my advocacy 10 years ago, I was probably like, oh yeah, you usually get one theme. And like, I was probably ostracizing every other person that had multiple themes. And so I have made mistakes too. And I just want to make sure that I'm saying that. But just like any career, and if advocacy is something you're going to pursue and do long-term, and Liz and I, we've talked about this when we met before, like, if you're going to be doing this, think of it like a career. You're allowed to grow, you're allowed to make mistakes, but please grow and please learn and please look to other people and how they advocate that are making an impact and making a difference. And just be very careful about how you are relating to other people's, just to the point of the person that just commented. And by the way, I'm really sorry that you felt that way. But OCD can show up in many different forms, especially just to pull us all in. So one person doesn't represent everything that OCD represents.
That's right. And I feel like one thing I really learned a lot during this journey and this path is, like our story is our story and it is our experience and it's valid. And it doesn't mean it's the same as someone else's experience, right? Like we can both be experiencing the same exact type of OCD, but feel it so differently, right? Or do treatment works in different ways. And that's important for us to know. I think the other piece that's really important that I just want to highlight as well, when we think about both like advocacy and treatment and the way OCD shows up and what it looks like, is that be thoughtful the way you use your story. And what I mean by that is that I think that when I first got thrown into advocacy, I was 17 and I was doing all these media stuff, and they wanted the dirty and the raw and the me struggling, and that was what they highlighted, and that was the B-roll and that was the footage, and there wasn't a ending that was hopeful. And I just want to push that when you are being an advocate, yes, when you're struggling, when you're having a hard time, it is relatable and it is important to share because it humanizes you, right? But make sure we're still sharing hope and we're still reminding people that treatment is available, that treatment does work when we're struggling. Because sometimes if the only way we keep relating is through our struggle, like I can't tell you how many patients come to our program and they say like, well, I know I'm going to have to live with OCD forever. I know I'm always going to struggle. And I'm like, what? Like, you don't have to accept always struggling just because you have an OCD diagnosis. And they're like, oh yeah, I do. I fall, but a lot of advocacy, the message we send, I used to send it inadvertently before I really thought about what was the message and the way people are interpreting this, was a diagnosis with OCD is terminal. It's long-term disability. You're always going to have to suffer. You're never going to have freedom. You're not going to be like, it's just always your struggle. And I embodied that. I spent a decade or more of my life thinking that if I could function with bad OCD, I was succeeding, and that was like the best. And I think we've all been there in different ways, where it was like, when we first start treatment, like treatment gets you enough to functional, but you don't actually do the hard stuff, but you do enough to get functional. And so you think that this is the best I'm going to get, but actually that's even harder than doing the hard work. I always tell people sometimes we're working harder, not smarter in OCD treatment, because we're actually doing double the work if we're kind of holding on, but we've done some ERP. But anyways, I say that just to say it's important for us to be really, really thoughtful about making sure we're sending messages of hope and that we're connecting people to good treatment. Ethan and I have talked about when there's movies or things on OCD, and then at the end there's no resources, there's no support, there's no connection for people who related to know what to do next. It just feels like such a missed opportunity. And I think as advocates, we have that opportunity in front of us.
Well put. Oh my gosh. I remember when I first started advocating and I would tell my story and I wouldn't caveat anything. My story is my parents kicked me out. Everything kicked me out. I ended up on the street. It was very this aggressive, sort of intervention. And so I'll never forget, a parent would come up to me and be like, yeah, so my kid's not really getting better. My child's
This happened on our tour. Do you remember this?
I'm not getting into specifics, Liz. Just be quiet.
That's why I'm laughing. People think I'm laughing at your sad story. I'm not. I'm laughing.
She's laughing because so this lady comes up to me and she's like, yeah, so do I need to kick out my child because he's not getting in trouble? I was like, well, how old's your child? She's like 7. I'm like, no, not really 7. It was 11 or 12.
It was 12. And I was like,
Liz is like, come here, we're going to talk about your story and how you frame it. And learned a lot from Liz in 2015. But
I did do that, and I was
she did pull me aside. We need to discuss this. So now this was my journey. This isn't your journey. But real quick.
Wait, can I say one more thing? I'm sorry.
You don't even have to ask. Just talk.
I love this point that we're making, because to me, the more that we're talking about this, like the more we are emphasizing responsibility in sharing and in advocacy. And I also want to counter that point too, not counter it, but like the opposite side of that is be very careful about saying, I went and got treatment and now my life is so wonderful. I have never experienced another intrusive thought or another like bad day ever in my life, because that happens too. And in fact, if I had started advocating right after treatment, I was so in denial. I would have been like, I got treatment and life is great, but it wasn't great. But I was also dealing with other stuff too. But still, like that is also the point. Like the pendulum swings in both directions, right? You also can't say, I got treatment and life is so wonderful now, because people who get treatment or if they're in treatment a lot longer than other people, they might think to themselves, oh my God, so-and-so got treatment in 4 weeks and they've never had another symptom in their life. And now I must be a loser. So it's that just further emphasizes the caveat of in my experience, in my treatment, in my this, because it's all individual. And we have a responsibility to the people that we are trying to inspire and motivate with hope.
And further, those caveats are so powerful because what they allow you to do is stay authentic to your story. And I think that's so important as you whether you advocate on your own, you advocate alongside other foundations, there's always going to be like kind of what we're talking about. We need to make sure that we're supporting the population as well as possible. But that doesn't mean change who you are. That doesn't mean don't tell your authentic journey, right? So, and I think that's something important to point out is that, as you get involved in whatever organizations or you stay solo, but, it's important to recognize is that your story, your journey, your heart, that's what changes lives. That's what people need to hear. And so don't ever think that, anyone is saying to you, no, like Liz, like she didn't say you can't tell the part where you got kicked out on the street. She simply said, make sure people know that that was a very specific to your journey after 18 months of all the stuff and so forth. So I think that's important to know is there's very easy caveats to be able to say, this was me, but then be as authentic and real about it as you possibly can. And I think because it's your passion, your heart that really makes the difference. Super, super quick. Liz, if you can just speak to Lola's experience in terms of thinking that maybe it was 1 or 2 subtypes, but in fact, she experienced multiple subtypes of OCD.
Yeah. So I can relate to this because I've dealt with every single subtype that exists for OCD, and it always shifted for me. And for me, literally, I would like deal with one thing and it would move to a whole new subtype, not just a new trigger. And so it was really kind of confusing. And this is normal. We expect OCD to wax and wane over time. That's a part of diagnostic criteria in the DSM. And in fact, I think that's why OCD is really misunderstood, is that from the outside, a lot of people are like, well, last week you were worried about this, and now all of a sudden you don't care about this, and now you're worried about this. This doesn't make any sense. Like, yes, OCD doesn't make sense. It's not logical, right? It is an illogical, irrational illness. But it is very common for people to have multiple subtypes. And so when we're doing treatment, most of the time we're working on multiple subtypes at once or one at a time, kind of depending on what level of care you're in and what makes sense and how immersive we can make the treatment. Excuse me. The second piece I'll say is that for many people, they might have multiple subtypes, but it's all rooted in one core fear. And then for some folks, there's multiple core fears. And so, feel free to watch. We've done some recent webinars on core fears, so we don't have to spend all today going through that. But just because somebody can think this cup is contaminated, but all 10 people that think it's contaminated probably think it's contaminated or are afraid of the contamination for different reasons. And so we want to understand, why are you afraid of that? Why? So what if you get contaminated? So what if that gets on you? Like, what is at the core? What's the fear of that? Is it that I'm afraid I'm going to get sick and die? Is it that I'm afraid I'm going to get someone else sick and I don't know how I could live with that feeling? Is it just that I don't like the feeling of disgust and that would be gross and I would have to have that feeling on me all day, right? There's lots of different reasons, but that is a really important piece in treatment that we want to get down to, because what we do find is that if we can get to the root of the core fears, we don't have to worry as much about OCD shifting and being this game of whack-a-mole, because we actually address what's at the core versus we keep addressing current triggers and current symptoms, and then it keeps shifting, which is the norm.
Well said. Well
I
said.
love all the core fears. I think it's so awesome. I'm so glad that
So important.
evolving to all that. Yay!
It's all evolved. I remember sitting in a car with Chrissy. She was taking me to the airport for Colorado, and she's like, "So, what's your shadow fear?" And I'm like, "My what?" And she would get into it, and I got on the plane. And I was like, "Oh yeah!" I was like, "She's right." Yeah. This was a friendly conversation, by the way. There's not clinical advice, but regardless, I was like, "There's something to this." Yeah. Anyway,
Carl Jung, shadow fears.
Yeah, exactly. Real quick, I want to be cognizant of time. Normally go over, but I know Chrissy has a support group at the end of the hour. Kartik, I see your. Well, thank you for tuning in from Singapore. We appreciate you. The IOCDF posted a link on how you can join and become an advocate and become involved with the IOCDF, whether an advocate or just get more involved with the IOCDF in general. There are a couple questions here that I think will resonate with a few folks, so I wanted to try to jump on them. Marnie at 7:40 p.m. asked, how do you decipher between knowing it's OCD or something else? My young adult son, age 20, has also different themes, and at this moment, it's, quote, he's so tired and can't do anything. We gave him getting treatment in residential type setting, but because he's tired, he's not fully participating. When I try and encourage him, he will tell me, I don't understand, he's so tired. Motivation doesn't seem to work. Any advice? And that's at 7:40 p.m., Brendan, if you want to post that so Liz and Chrissy can see it. Chrissy, do you want to maybe wait and start?
I need to read that again.
Okay. There it is.
I do better seeing it than actually hearing it. So,
while you're reading it, I'll share my quick advice, which is that I at least have found, right or wrong, there is no right or wrong, but whether it's true or not, I should say, is that advocacy is really your journey, and it happens in whatever way you want it to happen. I think that a lot of us kind of think that, oh, like IOCDF or someone's just going to like choose me to be an advocate and they're going to put me on shows and they're going to do these different things. When the reality is that a lot of that happens because we write to our local newspaper, we do a talk at our school, we do these things, and then all of a sudden it kind of gets traction and picks up. And I think nowadays there's opportunities to do blogs and social media and advocacy in these other realms that then can move into bigger pieces. So I read the wrong comment. Did I read the wrong question?
I was just going to embrace the new reality that we were in just now, because I
read the question. Brendan, you have to switch. Can you put up from Kartik at 6:39? Because you said 6:40 and I just went to 6:39. I'm sorry. I'm so embarrassed.
No, but that was.
We're gonna get back.
Am I reading the wrong thing?
We're gonna get back to the next question, but this question, I wanted to just say, Kartik, that a lot of it is about you starting to do your own advocacy. Ethan always says this, that like the folks that make it in advocacy are really hungry and that they're creative and they get involved on their own, and then they start to connect with other organizations and opportunities. So you definitely want to reach out to IOCDF, reach out to Game Changers, reach out to all the different places, Made of Millions, you name it, and see where the opportunities exist. But also start doing your own work. Start thinking about what is the avenue that advocacy that is it creative? Is it writing? Whatever.
Also, what is a hole in the community that needs to be filled? Where's the gap? Fill it, because there's so much advocacy that needs to be done. What is something about your story that nobody has heard about? Tell it. Like that. There's always places where there's always like corners that need to be explored with the flashlight.
And also choose your passion. What are you specifically passionate about? What do you relate most to? That's always a good starting place. And I'll give out some email addresses at the end, Kartik, and for anybody else that wants to connect and talk more about this. So thank you. And thank you, Liz and Chrissy. Marnie's comment at 7:40 p.m. I know Chrissy read it. She had enough time, maybe. Did you have thoughts on Marnie, who was asking about her adult son, age 20, having trouble engaging, getting motivated? Any advice?
From my perspective, and I really can only comment from the perspective of being a peer support, it's hard to be a parent and try to be a therapist and a motivator and everything else all in once. This is not only going to, this is going to exhaust you as well. A lot of times when I do meet with parents, I'm a certified peer and family support specialist here in the state of Colorado. So that is my certification. So I do meet with families a lot. And sometimes, what I try to communicate to families based on my own lived experience, is what you want to do is meet your child where they are at. I know that it is difficult to watch your child suffer, but like to the point we were talking about earlier, therapy, is, we want to utilize therapeutic tools in order for people to get better. And that's not something that you're able to give to your child if you're not a therapist. And even if you were a therapist and you were their mother or father, you shouldn't be, because that would be a conflict of interest. But anyway, but meet your child where they're at. Ask them what you can do to help support them. Also ask them what not to do to support them, because sometimes as kids, and when we have parents and we know that our parents want us to get better, but we aren't motivated and we're tired and we're scared and we're stuck in OCD, we are also scared of letting you down. We're also, scared to talk about what's going on with our experience. We don't want you to be disappointed in us. We want to get better and we don't know what to do, and we're terrified. So ask your son what you can do to support him. What does he need? And what should you not do that isn't helpful or supportive? That way you're both working on the support opportunity and ability to kind of move forward in what needs to be done next in treatment.
Liz, do you want to weigh in on this comment?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to. I think that when we see this kind of low motivation and willingness, and there may need to be some medication adjustments, I definitely would want you to talk to the psychiatrist. If depression is really bad and there's an opportunity to do some, if he's saying things like, I'm not understanding, I'm so tired, right? I would definitely want to consult with the psychiatrist to make sure there's not something else going on. Even blood work, simple things like low vitamin D, being anemic, right? Things like that can make a big difference in our motivation and mood. Motivation and being tired isn't OCD. Now, because of our OCD, we can be tired and not motivated. There's no doubt. But that symptom in and of itself is not an OCD symptom. Now, treatment looks similar for low mood and depression. We're going to treat it with behavioral activation, which is a treatment modality that is a part of the CBT grouping. So very similar to ERP and OCD treatment. But I'd want to talk specifically about what's going on, and does he need some specific depression interventions first to get him to be willing to do OCD treatment. OCD treatment is tough.
Thank you, Liz. It's nearing the hour. I'll end on this question. I know there's other questions and I'll give some email, but I think this is going to resonate with a lot of folks. Amy Trojan at 7:43 p.m. How can someone get better if they need a higher level of care and can't receive it because of finances and insurance won't pay? This is obviously a issue that is permeating through the community and comes up so much. Permeating isn't the right word. Liz is laughing at me. But anyway, is rippling, resonate, whatever. Anyway, it's a really important topic and issue. And I actually know that Liz is a real problem solver in this area. So I want to hear from Liz and then get to Chrissy on this conversation.
I'm not going to have any, I'm really not going to have that much to say about this. This is way out of my scope of practice.
Okay.
Yes. So there's always options. And I know y'all are like, Liz, you say that, but it's so hard. Like, there are always options. Sometimes we have to be super creative. What I will tell you is that obviously McLean Boston is the only residential program in the country that accepts insurance, yes, but also Medicaid, Medicare that has OCD specific treatment. Rogers and other programs, Amita, Brad Riemann is now running a new program out in Chicago that is a part of, I think it has a new name now maybe, but it was Amita that now has an OCD track as well that takes insurance, which is great. And then programs even like ours. So yes, we are self-pay technically. Majority of our patients use insurance. So they either are doing what's called a single case agreement, or they're doing like out of network, like an in-network exemption and getting reimbursement. A single case agreement is when you basically say to your insurance, you do not have options in network that will meet the treatment needs that I have right now. And typically one of your providers is going to write a note. They're going to kind of fight for that, and you're going to show that. And what you do then is you are basically fighting and saying, as a member of your insurance plan, you are required to give me treatment that will work for me if it's available. And so then we fight and say, listen, we know ERP is the first line evidence-based treatment for OCD. If you've tried outpatient and you're not getting better and you need a higher level of care, that is the next step. And so they need to find you an option. Most of them are going to come back and say, oh, here's some options. And you're going to be like, these aren't OCD specific programs. These are general mental health programs that say they treat OCD, but they don't. And so you go back and you fight for it. What I will tell you is I cannot explain the power of advocacy when it comes to this. If you advocate for yourself or your child, which is usually what's happening, you can make things happen. Yeah. And you have to be a, whatever you call it, right? Broken wheel. I don't know what it's called, but like you have to keep knocking on the door.
See, words aren't easy.
See? And they tell you no, and you keep fighting. Keep fighting. Squeaky wheel. Thank you. Keep fighting. And often it can happen. So there are a lot of options. And then of course, I think I'm the only program in the country, but I could be very wrong, but we do offer scholarships. And so we do offer scholarships for our higher level of care. I've always done it. It's something that we've always done. I can't tell people no. If someone knows me, that's good or bad kind of what I do. And when Michael Janicki was dying, the last thing I promised him is that we would officially start our Michael Janicki Scholarship, which would be a consistent PhD spot. So we do that here, and you can always reach out to me, and I will help navigate. The thing I will say is that sometimes we still have, as all three of the first program, by the way, was McLean OCD Institute in Boston. All of our programs have an admission process. And so there are still times people are not admitted to our programs. And that does not mean that we just chose to not give you a scholarship. If someone's not admitted, that means we don't think we're the right fit. So that often means that, and I'm just saying this in general, but that like OCD is not the primary diagnosis, or there might be something else going on, or we're giving a referral to a different program. And I say that just because I think sometimes people are like, I need OCD treatment, I need to go here. And then the admissions team is like, oh, we actually think this is where you should start instead. I know that's hard to hear at times, but it's really important, you guys, because it will allow you to get the right treatment and then be able to have a successful, outcome with ERP when you're ready.
For sure. I have one quick question for Chrissy, and then if she needs to jump before all the housekeeping, please feel free. But I just want to add to that point, we also recognize, with that being said, how hard it is to advocate for you or a loved one when you're completely exhausted and at your wits' end and feeling that lack of hope. It's awful. It is so hard. The last thing you want to do is also have to fight to get treatment, and to get seen and to be heard. And it's just like physical. I mean, the mental health care system is in the US, and, I can't speak for other countries, is not the best. And, with any other diagnosis, you also have to fight and get in and see the specialist because, they're booking 18 months out and you're like, you can't get out of bed. So, it's OCD isn't the only thing, but we recognize how difficult it is to advocate for yourself when you're feeling just absolutely horrible. But Liz is right. At this point in time, that is the only way. But reach out. I'm a good squeaky wheel. I am. That is like going to be loving husband, father, squeaky wheel will probably be on my gravestone. So ask people to advocate for you. Be aggressive.
Do you have something to tell us?
What's that?
You said loving husband, father, squeaky wheel.
Yeah.
Are you? What's happening? Why'd you?
What I said?
What? You on the spot randomly. Okay, never mind.
Because I said father?
Yeah.
I have cats. The family's coming, not right now, but I just meant in the future. I'm not also not like.
Was that like a silent bomb that you're telling us on live stream?
No, not at all. It was just like 100 years from now when I eventually pass, that's what it will say. It was
okay. I'm sure Katie is so embarrassed right now. We love you, Katie.
Yeah, whatever. But real quick, I know you got to run, but on that front of advocating for yourself, Amy Ellickson mentioned this in a comment, which is, and I know Chrissy has spoken, talk about a little bit about public policy, because that's the other side of things, right? If we can make change on the public policy legislation level, then, we can work that angle too. And I know you've spoken in front of legislation at Congress. Liz has done a legislation too. Can you speak a little bit about that in your work, and then we'll wrap up?
Well, this is why I said even earlier how important it is to be involved in your local community. I know that we feel like the easiest way to get involved in being an advocate is I'm going to create an Instagram account and I'm just going to go and do XYZ. That's great. And I'm so glad that we can reach people in that way. But what really is important too is your local community, because what is going on in your state? What we are 48th in the nation for mental health. Colorado sucks. Like, I'm just being honest. I run a government contract. We put peer supports in the state institutions. And a lot of the reason why I do that is because the advocacy I was able to do, where I would get up and speak to congressmen, and I would tell them my story, and I would tell them the needs of the people in the mental health system. There are people right now in your state that need your voice. And I'm going to tell you, it's just as easy as Googling lobbyists and organizations in your community that each legislative season are lobbying for the benefit of the people that are dealing with mental health in your state. Get involved, volunteer with them. They may want to use your story. They may want you to testify. They may want you to just help them out at getting the word around. Nothing changes with mental health in your state unless people are out there lobbying, and it's typically their lived experience that is going to really, really move the dial. So if you want to get involved and you really want to do some advocacy work, find out what the organizations are that are the lobbyists in your state and go to them and say, I am so-and-so. I have lived through this. I'm still living through it. If you're still going through treatment or if you're still working toward recovery, and say, how can I help your mission? And how can I help move this medical model to the recovery model? Because that's where we're aiming as a country. We're going from the medical model of treatment to the recovery model. And that's where your voice is the most important. And just before I wrap up really quick, I just wanted to give a shout out to OCD Game Changers, my nonprofit, and everybody on my board. I have 5 members on my board, and they're all doing amazing stuff. Alejandro's in Spain, and he is like the advocacy extraordinaire in the Spanish community. Margaret Sisson has Riley's Wish. Marshall Moses has the rap ciphers, and he does mental health rap ciphers, and they rap, and it's amazing. Elise Petronzio has the Octopus, and Lori has In Focus Counseling, and she does training for OCD, and they're amazing. And I just would love, if you were interested in doing an event, reach out to us. We will come to your community and we will help you build your local advocacy. And thank y'all. I love y'all. I really appreciate you having me on.
We'll do it again. There's lots more conversation to have. Chrissy, if you need a bolt, we totally understand. We can wrap up. But we love you, Chrissy, and thank you so much for being here.
Everybody.
Real quick, speaking on legislation, the IOCDF has created the public policy advocacy page. Brennan, if you wouldn't mind putting a link to that. This is actually an awesome page. You can take action. It has templates and lists of government officials and congressmen and senators and things like that. And it's such a great starting place if you want to reach out to your local government and need a place to start. This is a great, and Justine Dieger, who is in Canada, who's helping build that, has done an incredible job. An IOCDF advocate who's helping build that out, because we know it can be intimidating to want to reach out to the government and where do I start. So thank you for putting the link in the chat, Brennan. Yes, we'll have to do a part 2. Absolutely, Amy. We would love to do a part 2. I think this was just outstanding. Liz, any final thoughts before I just jump into final housekeeping?
No, I think that at the end of the day, what I want everyone to hear is that your voice is so powerful and has the chance to be so loud. And those of us who do advocacy know that it's not about the quantity of people that we help, it's about one person. And I know for many of us, one advocate made a huge difference in our life. And so I'm just so grateful for the advocacy that you guys do, and joining these live streams and taking the time and being just an active community member, because I really do believe we have the OCD community. I really do think has the best community in the world. And I mean that when I say that, and I'm just honored to be a part of it. So thank you for having me. It's rare for me to get to stay at work and be on with these late at night, because usually the kids are running around and it's wild, but I really enjoyed it and appreciate sharing the space with you, Ethan and Chrissy.
Yeah, always. It's always a pleasure to have you. I never see you after 4, so this is great. It's very, very exciting, and good to see you, Margaret. It is true. I don't want to carry this longer than we have to, but I'm doing some projects in other neurological spaces. They're not psychiatric spaces, and this community is unbelievable. As I try to break into and talk with other advocates and other indications and disease states and things like that, this community is just truly one of a kind. and everyone in it is an absolute superstar. So I couldn't echo Liz's sentiments more than that. With that being said, quickly, as always, I want to thank the IOCDF and Brennan behind the scenes. We'd love to hear from you. Take our live stream survey to tell us what you'd like to see on this platform. We look forward to your feedback. The survey can be found at iocdf.org/live stream survey. Also, camp registration is open. Register today to join the special event for youth with OCD and their families. You can register at iocdf.org/camp. As always, all the links are in the chat, by the way. As always, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, all the places so you're notified when we go live. And finally, if you're in need of resources or looking for a therapist, please visit iocdf.org. I want to thank Liz McInville and Chrissy Hodges for joining us. Please keep your links, the conversation up. All the links are in the thread if you want to revisit Game Changers or visit OCDI Texas. And everybody's just doing so much amazing work. Happy New Year. I'm so glad to be back and see everyone. With that being said, have a wonderful evening. Stay safe. Stay vigilant, feel the feels. Don't let OCD off the hook. And actually, I will see you on Tuesday for a solo community conversations. If you would like to hear about getting COVID for the first time on a cruise ship when you have health anxiety, I think you should tune in because that happened to me on your honeymoon. So tune in Tuesday, 7 p.m. Have a beautiful evening tonight.